Some would say that this episode of the World Economic Forum in Davos 2026 is perhaps the most consequential WEF that we are seeing in decades. The world is truly at a crossroads. To talk a little bit about that, Ian Bremmer, it's great to interview you face to face. We're often virtually linked. He's a political scientist. He's an author. He has founded the Eurasia Group. He looks at risk from a geostrategic perspective. Thanks very much for being with us. Donald Trump, day after tomorrow. Do you expect him to really redefine the stage with what he says over here in Davos?
I think it's always wise not to predict what Trump is going to do on a given day.
Right.
But what he is doing is redefining America's role in the global order. He is not committed to the U.S. Principally supporting a collective security system with its allies. He's not committed to supporting U.S. free trade architecture globally. He's not committed to supporting rule of law. And the Europeans most rely on that. So this is a crisis for Europe. It's a crisis for the transatlantic relationship. Anything he says is going to be seen in that context by everyone here.
In your latest report, you used the word 2020. You said that 2026 would be a tipping point.
Yeah.
So, and that is entirely associated with Trump and his politics. Is that right?
It really is. For so long, coming here to Davos for almost 20 years now, we've talked about China rising and maybe the U.S. and China being involved in a big conflict. That's not what's driving this at all. What's driving it is that the United States is saying it no longer wants to provide the leadership that it has been providing for decades now, particularly since the Soviet Union collapsed. And that brings us to what I call a Gzero world, a disorder, a lack of global leadership. The Americans are unwilling, and no other country or group of countries are willing and capable to fill the vacuum. And the level of uncertainty that causes the unmooring of traditional geopolitical relationships. We saw that with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney traveling to China, a new strategic partnership. We see that with the EU-Mercosur trade deal, which has been announced, wouldn't have happened otherwise. That's the tipping point that we're seeing.
Yeah. You've also spoken about the Gzero doctrine. It's essentially part of what you're talking about. But this is a new America with new policies, insular in a very big way, some would suggest. And the Gzero doctrine, it's sort of a take on the Monroe doctrine, is how you define this phase, this era, right?
I don't know that it's insular. I think it's unilateral. Insular implies that the Americans lack ambition. And while the U.S. is prioritizing control over its own backyard as defined by the president, I wouldn't say that the United States is uninterested in the rest of the world. The Indians know this. Iran, Trump was almost ready to launch strikes on Iran in the last few days and only held off really because they didn't yet have enough military equipment in the region, but it's now going there. So I think insular probably implies a limitation that we don't see.
So let's talk a little bit about Iran before we speak about Greenland, the hot topics as they were. Some would suggest that action hasn't already taken place against Iran militarily because executions have been halted, if indeed they have been. That's his belief. Do you believe that there is still some road for talk, compromise, call it what you want, between America and Iran?
I think that there's still time for talk, but Supreme Leader Khamenei has so far shown an unwillingness to provide meaningful concessions on the issues that would move the needle with the Americans on the ballistic missile program, on uranium enrichment and inspections, and on provision of support for the so-called axis of resistance, the Iranian proxies around the region. Absent that, I do think that the likelihood of U.S. military intervention directly in Iran once the American military is in place, especially to be able to adequately defend troops and Israel in the region, I think that likelihood is going way up. We are not out of the woods on Iran.
How would that actually impact the protesters on the ground? It's one thing to hit the Iranian military, the military installations, but how would that necessarily link up, unless there's a decapitation strike?
Well, even if there is a decapitation strike, that doesn't mean that you're getting rid of the Iranian regime. I mean, you basically just had a decapitation strike in Venezuela.
Yeah.
It's the same regime in place. And so what does that mean for the Venezuelan people? Well, I don't yet see a road for democracy. I still think the regime will be repressive. In Iran, I mean, there's already been thousands of Iranian civilians unarmed
Yes.
killed.
Yes.
And we've seen it before. We saw it in 2022. We saw it in 2009. And I expect we're going to see it again. This is a brutal and repressive regime that most of us
With or without Khamenei?
With or without Khamenei, in my view. Yes. I mean, you still have the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. You still have the Basij. It is a relatively well-paid, trained group that is very comfortable with using repression to ensure that they maintain a monopoly of state power.
Why does Trump want Greenland?
I wish I knew. Why does Trump want his name on things? Why does Trump want the Kennedy Center to be called the Trump Kennedy Center?
Yeah.
Why is he so desperate to have a Nobel Peace Prize? Why does he put his name? I mean, historically, his life has been, and his greatest success has been about promoting his brand. Mm-hmm. It's been about how, Trump, even on things he doesn't own, mm-hmm. he wants them to be named Trump, and mm-hmm. he gains some benefit from that. Mm-hmm. You and I speak for myself. I would not feel any particular growth in self-worth from having my name on something I didn't do anything for.
Right.
But Trump doesn't feel that way. Mm-hmm. And so for Trump, being able to own Greenland, and he's seen it on the map, and it looks a lot bigger with the Mercator projection
yes.
than it really is.
Yeah.
He wants to say it's his. Mm-hmm. Look, everyone I've spoken to in the administration mm-hmm.
does
not have a good reason mm-hmm. for why you need to own Greenland to ensure the security concerns that the Americans have. The Danish Prime Minister, who I know very well, mm-hmm. has already said many times to the Americans, all of your security concerns, we are prepared to negotiate. Yeah. The Americans have been unwilling to negotiate those concerns with her. Yeah. So obviously, this is something more existential for Trump, and this is something involving his own personal ego. And, when the interests of the president as a person become different from the interests of a country, you have a real problem. Yeah. And that's where we are on this issue.
So I'm just going to read out one sentence in the joint statement issued by the leaders of Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, and the UK, which I really feel summarizes where the relationship is. Tariff threats undermine transatlantic relations and risk a dangerous downward spiral. We'll continue to stand united and coordinated in our response. We are committed to upholding our sovereignty. It's unbelievable that European countries are telling America about something which is the bedrock of NATO, preventing any outside attack and ensuring that collective sovereignty remains. Is this the beginning of the end of NATO?
If you had read that statement without any context, you'd assume it was about Russia.
Yeah, that's true.
Having invaded Ukraine, and the fact that the Europeans now feel like they can't trust their critical ally is an existential threat to NATO. And if Trump persists on this path, it will be the end of NATO, if Trump persists on this path. Now, Trump has shown in the past that he can say things and he can back away from them. He talked about Canada being a 51st state. He doesn't talk about that anymore. This is a truly stupid thing. And it's a fight that Trump should not want to have. It's very unpopular in the United States. Yes. Americans don't know why the U.S. should want Greenland. They certainly don't want the Americans spending lots of money on Greenland as opposed to spending it on the average American. I mean, Redlanders and Bluelanders in the U.S. matter a lot more to Trump than Greenlanders, right? Yeah, so I think it's a mistake, but Trump has to be convinced. And part of the problem is that Trump is not only convinced he's right, and he's not getting any younger, but his own closest advisors are reluctant to criticize him. They're reluctant to tell him, sir, we think you're making a big mistake here. So that does mean that you can get yourself in some trouble.
Venezuela, some would say, is effectively a vassal state of the United States at this juncture. In terms of big oil moving into Venezuela and the American economy gaining substantially, are we actually seeing that work according to Trump's plans already?
Oh, I think that the military operation in Venezuela was an extraordinary success. The U.S. is very good at that in a way that the Russians aren't, the Chinese aren't. 6 months of planning, spectacular success, no American servicemen or women killed. And there's Maduro and his wife in prison in New York. So that's obviously a win. And it's popular in Latin America. Most countries, the populations say we support that. But this is not regime change.
No.
It's regime roulette. They spun the wheel, and now they've got new people from the same regime. But Trump has shown credibility in taking action against them, and the military is still right there, right off the coast. So the question is, how much are they willing to do? On oil, they'll do a lot. On a transition of power to the people and to a democracy, not so much. So what really, and of course Marco Rubio wants the latter. And many Venezuelan emigres who live in the United States and vote for Trump also want the latter. So I don't think it'll be enough for Trump just to have a new authoritarian state that supports the U.S. On oil and on drugs. They're going to have to actually do more in sharing power, and that's going to be a challenging, longer-term question.
India and the United States have been talking about a trade deal now for a long period of time. It's moved, then it's stopped, it's moved. It's nowhere close to being signed as we speak today. Perhaps it might take a few more months if it happens at all. There's a new relationship between New Delhi and China. Some would say that the relationship between India and the United States was premised on a common concern around China. Is that dynamic also changing with or without a trade deal?
At least a little bit it is, but part of it is because the Indians are in a better position to push back. There is, sort of a spectrum of how countries fall between FAFO, fool around and find out, and taco, Trump always chickens out. And on the FAFO side,
that's the headline right there, but carry on.
Well, I mean, it's pretty clear that's how Trump sees the world. And, FAFO, you've got, for example, the Venezuelans and the Ukrainians, and taco, you've got the Chinese and the Russians.
Right.
And it turns out India is actually more on the taco scale. Why? Number one, Modi's a very popular leader who's been in place for 10 years plus and understands that he's going to be there longer than Trump. Also because India is growing at 7-8% this year, and the trade relationship between India and the U.S. isn't that important. At the end of the day, it's not going to break India the way it would Mexico or Canada or the Europeans. So, this isn't so urgent for Modi that he has to respond to everything that Trump wants. And I think that where you are on that spectrum matters a lot.
Absolutely.
So India, a little more taco.
True. There's just been this IMF revision of India's GDP numbers that's gone up to 7.3%, despite the fact that sanctions are at 50%. If it goes up to 75% because of our economic relationship with Iran, then it could be anything. I mean, who knows what will happen. But for the moment, the Indian economy appears to be fairly resilient. So let's see how far that goes. But I guess...
And it's reforming.
True, it is.
Again, look at the insurance companies, private sector investment, nuclear, private sector investment. I mean, lots of things that India continues to do over a decade now that make it more attractive to international capital investment. This really matters. Most democracies around the world do not have that capacity.
Ian Bremmer, it's always wonderful to speak to you. Thank you once again, and it's great to see you face to face here in Davos. I would suggest that day after tomorrow is going to be one of the biggest and most important days of the year. Donald Trump over here is going to come with a big message. What's it going to be? We're going to have to wait to find out.